first shot didn't sound like a battle. It sounded like a branch, snapping in the deep cold. Then, far out in the white distance, a Soviet soldier folded down into the snow as if his legs simply vanished. No shouting, no warning, just one clean movement from standing to still. And somewhere in the pine forest of Finland, hidden so well that even binoculars would miss him, a Finnish sniper lowered his rifle and waited again. Not minutes, not even 1 hour. Sometimes he waited for several hours, because the cold was dangerous, the enemy was watching, and one mistake meant death. But on this one day, that slow rhythm of patience would turn into a number that sounded impossible. 40 men, in a single day, with shots so rare that the forest could almost pretend nothing was happening. It was January 1940, deep into the Winter War. Thus the fighting had started months earlier, on November 30th, 1939, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland with overwhelming force. The Red Army expected a fast victory. Instead, they met frozen roads, thick forests, and Finnish soldiers who moved like shadows. One of those shadows was a quiet farmer and hunter from Rautjärvi named Simo Häyhä. He was not tall, not loud, and not someone who looked like a legend. But the war did not care about size or pride. It cared about who could survive the cold, see first, and fire without wasting a single breath. The place was the Kollaa front in eastern Finland, near the Ladoga-Karelia region. If you look at maps, it feels like empty space. In real life, it was a maze of trees, low hills, and frozen ground so hard it could crack your boots. Temperatures dropped to brutal levels, in often near -40 degrees Celsius. Your eyelashes could freeze, your fingers could lose feeling in minutes, breathing through your mouth could burn your lungs. And yet men still crawled forward through that snow, because orders were orders. On both sides, soldiers tried to stay alive, while the land itself tried to kill them. Simo Häyhä served as a corporal in the Finnish army, part of the defense against Soviet attacks. By 1940, the Red Army was pushing harder, angry at how the war was going. At Kollaa, the Finns held defensive lines with small numbers, using the terrain like a weapon. Soviet infantry kept probing, looking for weak spots. The sound of mortars and artillery was constant, like distant doors slamming in the sky. But the most feared sound wasn't the shells, it was the silence after them. Because in that silence, just you could disappear. Häyhä didn't hunt the way people imagine snipers hunting. He didn't rush, he didn't chase kills, he waited for mistakes. Soviet patrols moved through the snow, sometimes in groups, sometimes spread out, trying to avoid being an easy target. Officers pushed men forward. Political officers watched from behind. Machine guns searched tree lines, and still, people exposed themselves for 1 second too long. A head above a snowbank, a shoulder turning at the wrong angle, a man stepping out to check a wounded friend. Those tiny moments were all Häyhä needed. He was known for firing slowly, one shot, then long patience. That wasn't just discipline, it was survival. Every shot could reveal him. The flash, the sound, the movement, everything could give away a position. And Soviet counter-snipers were hunting him too. They used rifles, binoculars, and sometimes entire squads to search for the source of a single bullet. If they suspected a sniper, they would blanket the area with machine gun fire or drop mortars until the ground shook. So Häyhä worked like a man who expected retaliation every time he pulled the trigger. He built his firing positions carefully. In the snow, he would shape a small wall in front of him, packed tight so the rifle didn't sink. He pressed snow around his body, flattening his outline so he looked like part of the drift. He even packed snow in his mouth sometimes, not for drama, but to hide the warm cloud of his breath that could rise in the cold air like a signal flare. In a world where one tiny vapor trail could mean death, you did not take chances, and his rifle mattered. Häyhä often used a Mosin Nagant M/28-30, a Finnish version of the famous Russian design. He preferred iron sights instead of a scope. That choice sounds strange until you picture what the cold did to optics. A scope could fog. It could reflect sunlight. It could force you to lift your head higher, making you visible. Iron sights kept him low, simple, reliable. In that frozen forest, simple was stronger than fancy. Now imagine the day this story is built around. It is early 1940 at Kollaa, and the light is weak. Winter daylight in Finland doesn't last long. You can almost feel the freezing wind cutting through layers of wool. The snow squeaks under movement. Somewhere ahead, Soviet troops are preparing another push, another probe. They believe the Finns are exhausted. They believe they can break through by pressure alone. Yeah, but they don't realize that one man has already chosen the ground where their confidence will die. At first, it's just one soldier. He steps into view between trees, moving carefully, thinking he is hidden. Häyhä watches through the sights, calm as stone. The rifle doesn't wobble because his body is supported by the snow, elbows locked into the drift like anchors. He waits until the target is exactly where he wants him. One shot, one body down, then nothing. No second shot, no fast follow-up. Just waiting again, letting the forest return to quiet. Minutes pass, then more movement. Soviet soldiers begin to search, crouching low, scanning tree lines. A few shots crack back into the woods, random and angry. Machine guns tap at the white hills, trying to scare the invisible predator away. But the bullets hit snow and bark, not flesh. Häyhä doesn't move, because the moment you move is the moment they see you. In that kind of war, stillness is armor. Another hour, maybe longer. A Soviet NCO, maybe a sergeant, tries to pull men forward. They hesitate. They've seen how quickly someone can vanish. The cold makes people impatient. The pressure makes them stand up too high. And that's when Häyhä fires again. Another clean drop. Another sudden empty space where a living man had been. It is slow, almost quiet, but it hits like a hammer to the nerves. This pattern repeats until the enemy begins to fear the gaps between shots more than the shots themselves. That's the strange psychology of a sniper like this. If you hear rapid fire, you can believe it's chaotic. If you hear nothing for long stretches, the mind fills the silence with dread. You start imagining eyes on you from every tree. You start ducking even when no bullet comes. You start making mistakes because your body can't stay tense forever. And that's when he strikes again. By the middle of the day, the Soviet unit facing that sector has taken repeated losses. They try to adjust. They crawl instead of walking. They use smoke. They send scouts. But smoke in frozen air doesn't always behave as expected. Scouts still have to look up at some point, and crawlers still have to cross open patches where the snow is flat like a sheet of paper. Häyhä is waiting for those patches. He knows the lines. He knows where feet will go, because there are only so many ways through that terrain. At some point, Soviet counter-snipers begin searching harder. They look for muzzle flash. They watch for disturbed snow. They aim at anything that seems off. They may even call for mortar fire into suspicious drifts. The shells punch holes into the landscape, throwing snow into the air like white smoke. But Häyhä's position is chosen with the kind of care you only learn when you've survived dozens of close calls. Even when the ground shakes, he stays low. He doesn't panic. He waits for the chaos to settle, because chaos always brings exposed targets. As the short winter day starts to fade, the pressure builds. The Soviet troops want to pull back, or at least freeze in place until dark. The Finns want to hold them there to prevent regrouping. And Häyhä keeps doing what he does best. One shot at the moment that matters most. A man carrying ammunition collapses. A soldier trying to drag someone back drops onto his knees. Just a silhouette appears against a pale snowbank for a second too long. Each time, the rifle speaks once and then goes silent again. This is where the number comes from. 40 in a day, not from spraying bullets, not from an impossible speed, but from a day where enemy movement never stopped, where targets kept appearing, and where one sniper's discipline turned the battlefield into a trap. It was a kind of math made from patience. Wait, watch, fire, vanish, repeat, hour after hour, while the cold tried to steal feeling from his hands and the enemy tried to steal his life. By the end of that day, the Soviet unit in that area would have felt like it was being hunted by something supernatural. But the truth was more chilling. There was nothing supernatural at all. Just a man who understood snow, distance, and fear better than anyone around him. The Finnish defenders at Kollaa used a phrase that became famous, Kollaa kestää, Kollaa holds, and it held, partly because one sniper made the cost of every step forward feel unbearable. Simo Häyhä's wider war record became legendary. Across the Winter War, in just over 3 months of fighting, he was credited with more than 500 kills, making him one of the most effective snipers in history. Soviet troops gave him a nickname, Belaya Smert, the White Death, because he blended into the snow like he was born from it. But behind the name was something more real and more human. He wasn't chasing fame. He was doing a job, protecting a line, protecting his country, and surviving a war that did not forgive weakness. His story almost ended suddenly, on March 6, 1940, near the end of the war, but when an explosive bullet struck his face during combat. He was badly wounded and fell into a coma. The Winter War ended shortly after, on March 13, 1940. Häyhä survived. He woke up on the day peace was declared. His face changed forever, but his life still his. In a war filled with massive armies and loud machines, he had fought with cold silence and careful aim. And that's what makes this story hit so hard. The idea that someone could fire only once every few hours and still change the outcome of an entire sector. The idea that in the middle of artillery, tanks, and endless soldiers, one patient man could become the force everyone feared most. Because in the snow at Kollaa, it wasn't always the biggest weapon that won. Sometimes it was the quietest one. A rifle that spoke once and then disappeared back into the freezing white, leaving the enemy to wonder when the next shot would come.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content.